Yep, I just started it.
Okay, cool. So, how's everybody doing today? The guest I have on with me today is Sean Fantuzzi. I've known Sean for probably 4, maybe 5 years or so now when he was at University of North Dakota. So we were co-workers for about a year and a half or so.
Mm.
That's how I know Sean, and I'll kind of just let Sean take it away from here and kind of introduce himself for people listening.
All right, thanks, Will. Yeah, my name is Sean. I used to work at the University of North Dakota. Couple pit stops before that include Loyola University of Maryland, St. Francis University of Pennsylvania, and did an extended internship at Penn State. And now I currently left the strength and conditioning world, but I am pursuing a personal training private sector position at Lifetime Athletic Club, where I am a personal trainer and a group fitness instructor, and just playing around with something different with that sense. I'm still training athletes. I still have a couple youth athletes I train. And as far as the programming goes, it's still strength and conditioning basis. So
Mhm.
not much has changed from shifting from the college world to the personal training world, just a little bit more individualized.
So how long were you in college, collegiate setting for?
Probably from internship and on 10 years.
Okay.
10 years is basically, I started shadowing, interning in my senior year of college and then, or junior year of college. And then after that, it spiraled. I knew that was something I wanted to stay with, the training aspect of side, and just went with it. Finally worked my way up to a graduate assistant position, part-time strength coach, full-time strength coach, and then feel like I kind of went through the ringer a little bit in my
Yeah.
process. So
Yeah.
now I'm
So
trying out
then,
something new.
was there a specific reason or reasons that you wanted to get out of the collegiate setting and into the private sector? Or were there kind of just a bunch of different factors that kind of led to that decision?
There are a bunch of different factors. To be truthful, one of the biggest things was time invested. Um, there are there were times where at the college setting, the time invested into your job didn't match with my um, family life. It didn't match with my uh, end goal as far as like what I wanted to do from a professional perspective.
Mhm.
And getting that time back has been awesome. Another thing was location. Obviously, North Dakota, not close to home for me, but, so it's been a blessing to be able to come back and drive an hour to see my family instead of flying a couple hours to see
Yeah.
my family and spending a couple $100.
Yeah.
The time aspect has been the biggest thing. I got my time back. I got time with my wife. And we've been able just to kind of grow a little bit more here, setting my own schedule through the private sector as opposed to uh, setting my schedule via what the sport coach wanted. You're almost, it kind of feels like you're on call. Um, Not 24/7, but it feels like it from time to time at the College
Yeah.
World, which, don't get me wrong, isn't terrible, but depending on the season, it can be a lot. Especially in, I was lucky enough to work with men's basketball when I was there, and as you know, um, sometimes you get a text at like 5 o'clock in the morning. Now I'm already up at 5 o'clock in the morning, but you get a text saying, "Hey, can you lift the guys at 6?" Like I'm drinking my morning coffee, still just sitting in my living room. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I've had a share of those moments for sure with some teams that I've worked with.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I miss it so much. I love the kids I worked with. I loved everything about the college setting. It's just, it's nice to get time back. And time
Yeah.
is something you can truly can never get back once invested.
Hmm. So let's talk about your time a little bit at UND.
Mhm.
So you were strength coach for men's basketball, women's soccer,
Mhm.
and assisted with football.
Correct.
Um, so now I'm working with men's basketball at UND. So when you were there, it was a totally different coaching staff than the staff that I work with now. There's been a lot of roster changes.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming your experience with men's basketball is probably quite a bit different than my experience with men's basketball. And it was a lot of changes for the kids I know too. So I just want to ask you, What was your typical day like with men's basketball training session wise? What did you exercise selection look like? How long were your lifts? What kind of things did you focus on in season, off season? What was kind of your general goal, general philosophy when working with those guys who, I mean, I know I've seen guys from 6'1" to 6'10". I know in the weight room there's only 5 racks, so it's not like there's a ton of space to work. You got to be flexible and adaptable with that kind of population, especially with the space that they have and the time you have with them. So I just want to hear your thoughts on how you dealt with that group when you were working with them.
Right. Well, it kind of obviously the answer is it depends. So I'm going to do
Yeah.
a couple of different scenarios. Firstly, when I first got there, I had the privilege of working with an amazing group, and we ended up going to the NCAA tournament for the first time. Um, yeah, first time ever. That was,
2016.
what's up?
2016.
Yeah. hmm
Okay.
Um, the core group that helped get us there was a bunch of seniors that had a lot of mileage on their legs. Seniors like Quentin Hooker, Corey Baldwin, uh, Drick Bernstein, like those guys, like they all had their role and they played and they've worked themselves up to that senior level where they truly were able to flourish at that time, winning the Big Sky tournament when we were in the Big Sky. Um, and with all those mileage comes workouts that I don't truly need to push them from time to time. I tended to pick my battles. One of the first things I did when I got there is I sat down with two of the seniors and said, "Hey guys, listen, I want to know what you guys did or what you guys like to do the day of a game, the day before a game, the days leading up to it, how you feel the best or when you feel the best. I want to know what you guys did." Um, and that really helped me dial in exercise selection and frequency when it came to the season, especially like the conference season. I got a better understanding of how they felt off what they did. So that kind of helped me choose different things. Um, for a while, it was very prehab focused because we had been dealing with some injuries or some past injuries that um, I just wanted to make sure we stayed aware of. But the
Can you give some examples of the prehab work that you guys did?
Yeah, so we did a lot of three-dimensional glute work and ankle work. As you know, a basketball athlete, I'm pretty sure, sleeps in their shoes. So what I,
Zero dorsiflexion.
yes,
Zero.
yes, what I like to call foot prisons. So I tried for the majority of our lifts, I wanted to make sure those shoes stayed off, or we did some sort of ankle work for at least 10 minutes with our shoes off, whether that's low intensity, like super low intensity plyometrics or hopping, to just simple 360-degree ankle rotations, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, self-myofascial massage. We did something like that every single time we stepped in the weight room. And that's something I find so valuable that we did that all 3 of my years at UND. I would have them take their shoes off all of the time. The only time I really wanted their shoes on was if we were doing anything on the court, since the court was right beside the weight room, and we were like doing higher intensity plyometrics or running. Trying to think what else. We deadlifted with our shoes off. Sometimes we squatted with our shoes off. We split squatted. If we did any Olympic lifts, which I did for the majority of my time there, I cycled them on, cycled them off. Um, and then for the most part, I kept the shoes on for those just to be on the safe
Yeah.
side,
Yeah.
because the floor with the elevated platforms, they were lifting on wood. They weren't lifting on like a play rubber floor.
Yeah.
So it's just safer on that side.
Yeah. So you guys lifted before practice, is that correct? When you were there?
Correct. You're
Okay.
correct. We adopted that micro dosing type of setting.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading a lot about Corey Schlesinger.
Yeah.
I don't want to say perfected it, but really was the pioneer when it comes to that. And I practiced a lot of what he did, and I owe a lot of my credit to a lot of stuff that he did.
So typically, what time would you see the guys, and what time are they on the court?
I would probably see them a half hour to 20 minutes beforehand, depending on the intensity of the workout that day. Um, I should have done, in retrospect, I really should have done a better job of knowing what the coach wanted to do from a intensity perspective.
You're talking about at practice, right?
Yeah, but that was
Yeah,
even tough for him to kind of
yeah,
balance. Sometimes we had practices that last 3 hours. Unfortunately, that's how basketball kind of goes.
yeah,
Now, I believe the better coaches out there is the sport coaches and the strength coaches that can work coincidentally. I think I just made a word up. Um, that can work really well together, have a better understanding of volume and intensity from a practice perspective instead of just a lift. And they do a much better job of balancing the two and pushing when they need to push. Um,
yeah.
Unfortunately, I just tried to do the best I could with the resources that I had. And some days were like before practice, we were hitting some really good light barbell complexes where we're working on technique, and then we're focusing on some three-dimensional movement and plyometrics. Other days we hit a heavy deadlift. Like there were days where we trap bar deadlifted 500 plus pounds on a couple of blocks, took it right into a high intensity depth jump, and then we went and had a little dunk contest here and there too. So that was kind of fun to see them dunking before practice and very feeling like they're very able to like fly because they're
Yep,
doing those extensive plyometrics, sort of like a post activation potentiation technique.
yep.
So that was
And
cool.
did you have the whole group in there at a time, or did they come in smaller groups based on position or based on film schedule, anything like that?
It kind of depended on the different day, specifically when different guys had scout team practice or not.
Okay.
Uh, I didn't mind having the whole group at once. Thankfully, a basketball team is small enough to fit in that weight room,
Mm-hmm.
and we utilize the stairs, we utilize the hallway, the court. We try to use every square inch. I
Mm-hmm.
promise I used it from time to time.
Yeah.
But it sometimes we did like a high minute guys, and then scout team, and we just flip flopped.
Mm-hmm. And then you were going what every day that they were in town, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what we did this past season too, except we lifted after practice.
Okay.
So our typical day lifting wise, so they practice at 12:45.
Mm-hmm.
Lift would be scheduled for 3, 3:15, 3:30, or 4,
Okay.
depending on the day. So sometimes they're doing film at 12:45 on the court at 1:15. Sometimes they're on the court at 12:45 and they're on the court until 3:30. So like some days they're on the court the whole time and they're coming in beat up. Um, what I did with our guys is we measured their vertical jump
Mm-hmm.
when they were fresh,
Yep.
gave them their calculated coefficient of variation, gave them somewhat of like a window of performance where we know that a certain guy should be able to jump 22 to 24 inches every single day, regardless of biological variation, social interactions that day, their psychological state. They should be able to jump within that window.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they're jumping outside that window below, then that's when we would make adjustments. And then we would also go for like the higher minute guys. So if they played a game on a Wednesday and they came and lifted on a Thursday, the guys who played 32 minutes plus, I wouldn't even really care what they jumped. I would have a system in place for them to adjust their training already. Um, and that's where I don't know what the better way to go about that is, because there's some guys on every team that are going to cheat the system, and you know
Sure.
that. And so some guys don't want to lift, and they're going to go over to the jump mat and they're going to give a half-ass effort, and they're going to say, this is what I jumped, it's below, so I can't do the deadlift today, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it was my first year with the guys. I'm still trying to get to know them, they're still trying to get to know me, I'm trying to develop trust and all that with them, where I need to figure out the best way to kind of incorporate I just call it the load management part of training.
Yeah.
But that's what we did. We had our vertical jumping. They came and jumped. They did 2 jumps on the jump mat every single day. If both jumps were below their window, they had a system in place. They know what they're adjusting each day. If they had 1 jump in the window, 1 jump below the window, I'd have them jump a 3rd time, and it was that 3rd number. If they were in the window, they're training hard, doing the regular training session. If that 3rd jump was below, then they'd have the adjustment that they already know what to do. Um, and then we didn't do as much kind of intensive plyometrics as you guys would do, since they're lifting after practice. So what our training sessions typically looked like would be come in, they would do their main lift for the day, whether it's a deadlift, squat, uh, split squat, reverse lunge, something that would be considered on the force side of the force velocity curve, something on that heavier side, just to stimulate the strength adaptation for them. And then we would go into probably a pair of 2 different lifts, an upper and a lower, that the upper body is typically going to be higher in volume, just so they can build some muscle and feel good in their upper body. And then after that pair of 2 exercises, upper body and a lower body, then we would do some sort of a cool down, which would consist of body weight isometrics, some sort of prehab, some sort of like an ankle rocker or something like that. And then we were out of there probably in 30 minutes. I don't think we were ever more than 35, 40 minutes ever in the season. Usually probably 25 minutes. So that's what our days typically looked like. So just sharing that part of my basketball experience, and then just getting ready for this quarantining to stop so we can get back after it this summer and kind of go hard again. So
I can't imagine uh, I can't imagine what it's doing to college strength coaches in general. I mean,
mhm.
you're basically adapting body weight circuit training for
Yeah,
all athletes. I mean, you can create some simple stuff around the house, like using a 50-pound sandbag for some squats, but there's only so much stuff that you can do. Um,
yeah,
but it's got to be tough for the college world, because like thankfully like I'm able to bring a couple things home from my gym, and
mhm.
my athletes are able to kind of like get their own stuff as well, or my clients. I should I They are my athletes, but they're also my clients. I still treat them like athletes, and but like from a college setting, I see like some of my former athletes doing a bunch of bodyweight circuit stuff, and it's like, how hard are they really kind of pushing themselves? Some of them are, don't get me wrong, but some of them are just kind of like going through the motions, doing a
Yeah,
2 minutes of abs, then checking their phones and Instagram for like 6 minutes, then doing another 1 minute of abs. You
yeah,
So it's a difficult time right now. Unfortunately, this is kind of the world we live in, a sci-fi movie type of world, but
yeah,
kind of just got to roll with the punches and be patient.
yeah,
What I have thought about is, at least maybe for the professional world, I'm thinking about NBA basketball. A lot of this rest time is going to be really good for the athletes, um, just because an NBA season or even an NHL season, like people get banged up pretty
oh
good.
yeah,
So this rest, as long as it's going, I would think like 3 or 4 weeks of rest, really good. As long as we're going to be getting here, I don't know if this extended time off is going to hinder them from a injury perspective or not.
right,
That's the big question that I'm kind of asking right now, is how much is too much time rest between competition?
yeah. And who knows the answer to that? I don't think anyone really knows.
Well, we won't know until it happens, and
Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, thankfully they have commissioners around the nation are like delaying season openers, starting to get new ideas as far as um, like building the word I'm looking for, charities to kind of help
yeah,
with this whole quarantine, relief funds and all that.
hmm,
So we're doing, like, people out there are doing good things to control it and try to
yeah,
build the money up to kind of to help research and everything like that. But you can only do so much from a training perspective, in my opinion.
Hmm.
You don't have a home gym. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to ask you about is RPR. So you're certified in RPR, is that right?
Correct.
All right. So when were you certified? Uh, who do you use the RPR with? Do you use it with your personal training clients? Did you only use it in the college setting? What's your experience been with RPR?
So I was one of the
Sorry, for people who don't know what RPR is, it's reflexive performance reset.
yeah.
So I'll let Sean go into it. I don't know much about it, so I'll let
So
Sean.
so I got certified in RPR way back, probably the summer after I started at UND. Good friend of mine said it was the reason why they won he put it as the reason why they won the Big Ten hockey tournament after going double overtime game, double overtime game, double overtime game to win the Big Ten hockey tournament. I was like, if he's saying it and those are the results, I at least want to take a look at it. Contacted Cal Dietz, who thankfully lived 4 hours away from me in North Dakota, became a massive resource. And all it is, it's a series of breathing and rubbing reflexive parts on the body to elicit a feel good stimulus, shifting from a um, basically a scared state or a fight or flight state to a performance state. Um, and I started using it immediately with both basketball and my women's soccer team.
How
Um,
did they take it? Were they skeptical at first? Did they like it right away? Or
when I first started texting on my way back, on the drive back, I started texting everyone. I'm like, hey, we're going to implement some really cool stuff. Um, and they were really excited about it, or I think they were a little scared because I was getting to that point where I really wanted to dive into some harder training. So I think they were a little scared, but I also think they were kind of excited. I hope they were a little excited. And then when I started going over some of the stuff before I had them try it on themselves, they were like, I don't know, something weird's going on here. And then
yeah,
once we started doing it over and over and over again, they really felt the difference to the point where we were doing it. Um, we spent 2 minutes maybe in the warm ups, just kind of hitting certain spots depending on the person. It was a big pregame thing. Like they would come to me whenever something didn't feel right, strength test them, figure out where the compensation pattern lied, uh, get rid of it, retest, held up strong. So especially like the pregame is when it really became a big deal. I would be in the training rooms of the teams an hour before games or hour before warmups, really make sure they're firing on all cylinders. And I mean, I knocked on wood every game. It worked, in my opinion. There were, or not my opinion, in fact, I never had a hamstring issue. I never had a no contact ACL issue with basketball or women's soccer. And the time missed, if I'm not mistaken, the time missed or the games missed in that first year of implementation due to injury. I think between the two sports, I'm pretty sure I only had 3 games missed um, and 1 game missed by a starter between the two teams. So
okay. So which kind of, I don't know much about it. So like which, forgive my ignorance, which pressure points or parts of the body do you think um, positively impact performance the most?
well,
If you think any of them are more important than the others.
I do. It all starts with your quote zone ones, which are your diaphragm, your psoas, and your glute. Those three kind of are where you get your hip flexion and hip extension and breathing from. If you try to move forward without going into hip extension or hip flexion, you're just going to fall on your face because it's not possible. So if you can dial in those things like to a point where they are strong as shit, chances are you're going to have a much better time running, sprinting, jumping, doing things athletically because those three things, or specifically the psoas and the glute, are doing their job to the optimum level. And that's what we're going for with RPR. We're trying to get those muscles firing at an optimal level and firing in the correct order, because that's what's going to reduce the risk of injury.
So how long do you kind of dig into your tissue to get the response? Is it 5 seconds? Is it 20 seconds? Is
Um,
it does it depend on the person?
it kind of depends on the person, but I mean, right here, if I'm rubbing my sternum, I'm going to do that before every workout. I'm going to hit my psoas. I'm just trying to dig a thumb into the psoas, massage a little bit, add a big belly breath. Behind here is the glute, which is kind of fun and kind of weird spot for the glute to
Hmm.
be, but it's where it is. And then I'm good to go. So I'm good enough with it. I feel comfortable doing a couple things real quickly. I spend about 5 to 10 seconds total on everything. Some people need a little bit more, and that's just kind of on them. It's whatever they feel is going to best prep them. Um, I know some people before their game, they would kind of sit in the corner, do a little like calm down meditation type of thing, where they would sit and they were kind of scrubbing their chest for a minute.
Yeah.
It's a little unnecessary. It might cause a little bruising, but that's what they want to do. So I'm gonna let
Did you
them.
get a pretty good buy-in with your athletes after they've been through it a few times?
Yeah, they really felt good off of it. They really saw a big kind of stronghold difference, and what was cool about it was helping people recover more efficiently. I remember
Yeah.
we did a hill sprint run with the soccer girls in the off season, and it was hill sprint Friday, and we all had them up to the heart rate monitors, and then we would. The workout was sprint to the top of the hill, walk down. When your heart rate got to a certain level, you sprint back up, and you had 15 minutes. You try to get as many sprints as you can, but you couldn't go unless your heart rate was back down to a certain level.
Hmm.
Um, well, the next week we did the same thing. I just told them, okay, when you get to the top of the hill, hit your RPR spot immediately, specifically your sternum and your rib cage. And on average, people were sprinting 2.5 to 3 more reps. Now, granted, there's an acclimation period that the body goes through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying it was just RPR. I'm just saying
Right.
it was a positive performance factor.
Yeah. Interesting. Then, so okay, so you just brought up the heart rate monitors.
Mhm.
So you've had some experience with some technology. I've got some experience with technology. We use the push bands
Mhm.
with men's basketball. I've used the vert monitoring system a little bit with volleyball. Now the coaching staff for the volleyball team here kind of took that over, so I don't use it as much. But what's your experience been like with first beat with the heart rate monitors?
First speed has been good. I unfortunately don't get to use first speed anymore,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the one thing that I've always kind of not looked down upon, but one thing I've always ever questioned, and I just think it's because we haven't had the ability at UND to truly do this on an individual basis, was the way first beats um, training zones are laid out. It's very generic. It's 220 minus your age.
Okay. Yeah.
90 to 100% is zone 5. 80 to 90 is zone 4. Like, those are incredibly generalistic, and
Yeah.
the vast majority of people are not as generic as that. So you really have to go through a true VO2 max test uh, to understand where someone's zones truly are, which that's the cool part about the athletic club I work at now. We
Mhm.
do have a true max test. We have a metabolic test that we strap people up to a face mask, measures their oxygen input output, basically like measuring the exhaust in a car. We have them on a treadmill as they're running. They're giving us like a subjective reading, like a 3 difficulty, 4 difficulty, and we're increasing the speed every 2 minutes or so.
Mhm.
And through that, we're able to get a much better representation of the data, break down the data a little bit more, and find their true training zones that are specific to that individual.
Yeah.
If that's something that I could have done at UND, I absolutely would have, because it would give people a much better representation of their metabolic rate, their training, how hard they're truly working. Because a lot of people don't know what their what their true suck zone is. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to get there. It really, truly is hard to get there unless you're pushing that sled on the turf in the Hislop. That's easy to get. Um, but yeah, it's just something that you kind of have to push towards, and
Hmm.
um, seeing the different metabolic rates. If I would have been able to do that back at UND, I think we would have been a lot better off or at least seeing a better representation of people's metabolic
Yeah.
recoverability.
That'd just be so hard to do with how many girls on a soccer team? 20, 25?
32.
Yeah. So like that takes a lot of time to test all 32 girls and
Yeah,
analyze the data, break it down, and talk with them about what everything means. But
it's true. It takes about, I mean, our tests here at Lifetime take an hour. So
yeah,
to do it for 30 people, it's gonna take a little bit of time.
yeah. Do you think there's, I guess my opinion on a lot of technology is I love it. I think as a general rule, the more data we can collect, the better. And if we don't see anything from the data, we can just throw it out and not use it. But I also think on the other side, it's becoming too invested in our time training athletes where we want to overtrain people sometimes and like
Yeah.
you said get into that suck zone. I guess, do you think some of the technology is kind of going too far where we are backing up too much and we're kind of coddling the athletes a little bit too much at times to where now we're under preparing them, which is actually, in my opinion, would be neglectful for their performance, for their health, and for their development?
I do to an extent. I think I love overtraining my athletes. To me, it's fun to see them super compensate. That being said, with basketball specifically, that's tough for as much as they play, as much as they're able to practice. Like if you look at their time allowed on the court, um, it was you get 4 hours on the court and 4 hours in the weight room in the off season. Now it's you get 6 hours on the court and 2 hours in the off season. That doesn't give you a lot of time to truly get hardcore training in as much
Mm-hmm.
as you want to, at least unfortunately. Um, so that you can play around with overtraining them then, but you're running a rough line as how
Yeah.
much you're really going to get overtraining. They're almost overtraining on the court.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Well,
so
they're spending 3 hours on the court some days.
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. That is their sport. That is their skill. It makes me
Yeah.
wonder. It makes me wonder. It's like, are we doing them a disservice by not giving them those 2 hours in the weight room and just giving them 8 hours of basketball play?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're taking away from skill development in that sense. So I don't know. You can go either way with that sense.
Yeah.
But as far as like overtraining an athlete because of the technology we have, yeah, I do think we are kind of coddling. Like, there's a reason Kevin Durant, there's a reason Kobe Bryant were as good as he is. You hear the stories about Kobe Bryant, granted, again, outlier, but there's a reason Kobe went to bed at 10 o'clock after a 3 hour practice, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and was back in the gym or earlier.
Yeah.
Like, the greats know how to take care of themselves. And if you look, I mean, if you look at LeBron, like he spends the money, like has to be over $1 million, probably closer to 2 million, $3 million on his body year round to make sure that he's prepped and everything has the best chance to recover.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I agree, recovery is vital when it comes to professional college athletes. But I also think, how much are you truly recovering as a college athlete? Because you know they're going to go out and party. You
Yeah.
know they're going to be a lack of sleep. You know they're going to spend countless hours in the library studying. Like, how are they truly fully recovering?
Mm-hmm.
Do we truly have a good grasp on that, even with technology? I don't know. I mean, I've had athletes that were walking to class and roll their ankle. Like, yeah, I don't think the FMS is going to fix that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I was always fighting a losing battle, but at the same time, um, you do it, you really like to show them you're not just coaching them to become stronger, become more conditioned for the sport. Like, yes, the end goal is to win. That's the number one predictor of success is, can you win? But there are a lot of things that go into that as well. So
Yeah. So I'm circling this back to something you said earlier about having a dunk contest with the basketball guys. So before the season started, when I was allowed more time with the guys in the weight room, and we could kind of have more intense training style with them. One thing that I like to do, this was the last 3 weeks before they began their would be their preseason. So this is like September. What we did is we would do a potentiation cluster of some sort, and so their like heavy lift would be some sort of a isometric mid thigh pull or back squat into the pins at a higher, more extended position, or just a heavy lift for like a set of 1, set of 2, set of 3, and then we would go into on the court, and I would say, I want you to have 2 or 3 dunks, and that's going to be your specific jumping. That's where I want this potentiation effect to happen, is on the court, because we can do all the box jumps, all the hurdle jumps, all the depth jumps we want. But I want you guys to actually practice the skill of dunking in this potentiated feeling. Yeah. So I don't know, just that just reminded me when we were talking about basketball players and something you said earlier. That's what I like to do, and I'll probably continue to do it because they loved it. They bought into it. And actually they were really good about doing their set and then going onto the court and getting their 2 dunks and not spending 10 minutes out on the court before coming back into the weight room where they're just goofing off the whole time. It was productive. And that's something that I thought worked really well, and they loved it too. So yeah, I just had a thought about that.
Oh yeah. Anytime you get a basketball player to do something basketball related when it comes to lifting, you're going to get a little bit extra buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing when a basketball player gets a ball in their hand. Like, you see some special things happen. I remember we had a kid that it was kind of walked like Gumby, kind of like all over the place. Arms were kind of like all shaky. It's just kind of walking like this. And you put a basketball in his hands. He dribbled up the court, and his it fixed his gait pattern. It's like, what?
Yeah.
That neurological cue of just having a ball and dribbling it, is that strong. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So before we kind of wrap this up, there's a question I like to ask everybody. Is there something or several things that you've totally changed your mind about since you kind of began in this field? Is there something that you used to do that you look back on and think, what the hell was I doing with that program right there? I'm never doing that again. And is there anything that you used to think is a waste of time, but now you've learned more about it and now you implement it in with your programs for either athletes or your general pop?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great question, because if you're not evolving your training programming, then you're not evolving your athletes themselves or yourself. Few things that I know that I was very big on were I prided myself on being very good at teaching the Olympic lifts. And over the last couple of years, specifically the ones at UND, I've phased them out to an extent. Or at least the heavy ones to an extent. We would still do some clean complexes. We front squat, we jump shrug, we would do all that kind of stuff. But like, as far as like a heavy clean or a heavy snatch, I didn't find it very useful, especially depending on the season. Like, there are a lot of people that don't like it, and you would get a better intent out of something if they liked the particular movement. And that's what it's all about. It's getting the intent of the movements, getting the intent of the power, the force development through a movement. So you throw a trap bar deadlift in, or an explosive trap bar deadlift where they're trying to get off the ground as high as they can. Hey, look, that's a clean. And it made more sense to spend time doing things that the kids actually like to do. Another thing, I got away from always being very bilateral. I know that the big argument right now that's really fun to talk about for or argumentative for a lot of coaches is bilateral versus unilateral. Can we just agree that both are good and like you can get strong in the squat and the deadlift and you can get strong in the split squat and like it just makes more sense to use both instead of arguing which one is best.
Yeah, I think as long as you're loading appropriately with
Yeah,
the appropriate volume and the appropriate frequency, the actual exercise you use probably doesn't matter that much. And if
exactly.
it does matter, it probably matters for power lifters or weightlifters or CrossFitters, you know what I mean? Like people who actually that's practicing their sport by using a certain exercise.
I can tell you right now what I like when I was training my wife this past summer. Like I did a triphasic cycle with heavy split squat or heavy safety bar split squat isometrics, and we got her back squat to go up. Um,
Mm.
we also did a 5-3-1 program a year ago, and guess what? Her back squat went up. So it's like they both work. It's the extent, can you load it appropriately? Can you periodize it appropriately? And can you, are you smart enough to put them where they belong in the training process?
Yeah.
That's the
The
big,
most important thing is the actual stimulus that the athlete's receiving, not,
and that's,
yeah.
and that's the reason why I follow Cal Dietz as closely as I do is because he's invested in the response from the stimulus that he gets. It's not most often it's not immediate.
Mm.
Um, but more often than not, especially with a triphasic cycle, like you're looking at the end of the the heavy super maximal isometric phase, like they're not probably going to hit their max the week after. In fact, they're 100% not going to hit
Yeah.
that new max the week after. It may be 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on the athlete afterward or after that week that they're going to actually feel their best.
Mm.
So like,
And
yes,
that's something that I think is important to communicate with the athletes too, because a lot of times they're going to want the results next week or 2 weeks later.
yeah,
And it's like, we're in the middle of the off season. We don't need, we don't need it right now. Let's let yourself develop. And then 6 weeks from now, let's see where your performance is at. But,
I will say another thing that I've done a lot of research on that has changed the way I view plyometrics and just training process, or the training process in general, is the work of fascia in the human body. And if you haven't read the book, oh, I'm forgetting the name of it now. It's just called Fascia Training. I know Bill Parisi is a co-author of it. I actually sent my copy down to Nick DeMarco at Elon because he was pretty interested in it. And I think that's an underrated thing that coaches should look into, simply because from an injury perspective, you can mitigate a lot of injuries if your fascia is very tense, has the ability to be very tense and then very loose, depending on the joint it encompasses.
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Thinking about how you really train the fascia other than just load, really? Or
There's load, but there's also like I think so. For example, jump roping is one of the best things you could do for the tensile strength of the ankle. Um, I,
that's becoming a pretty popular thing right now. The
yeah,
extensive plyos, the low level, low intense, high volume ankle jumps and all that.
yep.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. That's another reason is like fascia is created or fascia is made up of collagen polypeptides.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons that I've switched my proteins to a collagen based protein, just to make sure that all the fascia in my body is like as good as I can get it because
Yeah.
my training regimen. So yes, I do CrossFit, but I also want to like I want to stay strong with it. I want to do all the
Mm-hmm.
movements I can with it. But I also want to make sure like I'm staying as injury free as possible.
Yeah. Awesome. Good stuff. Well, I think we're kind of running out of time here, Sean. So for people listening, if they want to find you on social media, where can they find you?
Facebook, I'm on. Instagram, Twitter, I'm on. With I guess let's call it a handle or I don't know. Sean Sean Fantuzzi, Fan, the number 2, and then the letter Z. Uh,
Awesome.
Pretty simple. Had it for a while.
I'll put your handles in the show notes as well in the description for people to find you as well. So
Awesome, brother.
yeah, I appreciate you being on. It was fun. I hope the conversation was useful for everyone listening, and we'll take it from here. Have a
Awesome.
good day, guys.
Thank you so much for having me on, Will. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. See you, man.
Take care.